In a quiet hospital tucked on the outskirts of the city, nurses rushed into the delivery room, smiling, excited. A healthy baby boy had arrived, but the moment they laid eyes on him, everything changed. The first nurse collapsed instantly, her tray of instruments crashing to the floor. Another gasped, stumbled back, and began to convulse. Panic rippled through the room like a virus. One doctor dropped to his knees, clutching his chest, whispering. David didn't cry. He just opened his eyes, and anyone who dared to meet them either fainted or worse, died. Within minutes, alarms blared, and the maternity ward was evacuated. 3 nurses didn't survive. The others were left with haunting visions and trauma they could never explain. David's parents, Ruth and Emeka, stared in horror. He was perfect, his skin radiant, features carved like art, and his eyes glowed with a shimmering, unnatural brilliance. But that beauty was a curse. "What have we brought into this world?" Emeka whispered, holding Ruth's trembling hand. They named him David, meaning beloved, though they dared not let anyone near him. Hospital staff insisted on covering the infant's face, sealing him in a medical isolation pod. News of the incident was quietly buried, written off as gas leaks and human error. But the truth was far stranger. At home, Ruth wrapped his head in soft cloth, a mask, a shield, a prayer. They covered every mirror, every reflective surface. Their home became a fortress, not to protect David from the world, but to protect the world from David. As days turned into months, they saw it clearly. David was not like other children. He never cried. He seemed to understand things no infant should. And though he never spoke a word, his eyes told stories that could kill. From that moment on, one thing was certain. David's beauty was not a blessing. It was a weapon. And the world wasn't ready for what he carried in those eyes. The house David grew up in was silent, dim, and always closed off from sunlight. Thick curtains hung over every window like watchful guards. Mirrors were banned. Even the TV stayed off, just in case a reflection slipped through. By the time David turned 5, his parents had designed a strange but necessary invention. A mask made of soft, layered carton, padded inside, with only 2 tiny pinholes for breath. It wasn't pretty, but it kept people safe. They called it his shield. He wore it every day, while other kids played in parks and went to school with lunchboxes and backpacks. David wandered the narrow hallways of his home, his carton mask creaking with each step. Ruth taught him how to read, while Amika filled his mind with numbers, puzzles, and history. And David soaked it all in, like a sponge with no limit. By age 9, he was quoting Shakespeare and solving math problems twice his level. He had built a miniature city out of cardboard boxes, giving each paper citizen names, voices, and stories. His world was rich with imagination, but painfully empty. Sometimes, he would sit by the window, hidden behind the curtains, and listen to the laughter of neighborhood children. He imagined what their faces looked like, what it felt like to laugh with someone, what it meant to be seen, truly seen, and not feared. "Mum," he asked one evening, "am I a monster?" Ruth froze at the sink, her hands trembling in the soapy water. She turned, walked over, and gently placed her hand on the side of his carton mask. "No, my son," she whispered. "You are a miracle the world wasn't ready for." But David wasn't sure. All he knew was, miracles didn't wear masks. Monsters did. By the time David turned 12, the walls of his home began to feel smaller. His cardboard cities bored him. The laughter of children outside no longer sparked wonder, only longing. "Why can't I go to school?" he asked one night, his voice muffled behind the ever-present carton mask. His parents stiffened. Ruth looked at Emeka. her eyes heavy with fear. "You know why, David," Emeka said gently. "I'll keep the mask on. I'll never take it off. I promise," David pleaded. I want to know what it's like to be normal." For days, silence filled the house like a fog. But eventually, Ruth gave in, her heart breaking with every heartbreaking. They agreed, under strict conditions. David would never remove the mask, not even for a second. He'd sit alone in class, avoid eye contact, and come home immediately after school. The school principal, sworn to secrecy, was told David had a rare, light sensitivity condition. When the first day of school came, David stepped onto the school grounds wearing a newer version of his carton mask, painted black with duct tape reinforcements. His backpack hung awkwardly off one shoulder. His steps were slow, cautious, and terrified. Whispers started the moment he walked through the gate. "Who's that? Is that a Halloween costume? Why is he wearing a box?" Laughter erupted as kids pointed, mocked, and filmed him with their phones. Some called him Robot Head. Others said he looked like a walking trash can. David said nothing. He simply kept walking, each step heavier than the last. In class, he was seated in the back, away from everyone. No one dared sit near him. But despite the jeers, David remained calm. He listened. He learned. He remembered every name and every face, not with bitterness, but quiet curiosity. All he wanted was a chance. And though they couldn't see it behind the mask, David's eyes scanned the classroom, hoping someone, anyone, might look past the box and see him. By the end of his first week, David had a nickname that stuck like gum on a shoe: the Carton Boy. He heard it whispered in hallways, scribbled on bathroom walls, even chanted across the playground. "Carton Boy! Carton Boy! What's he hiding? Alien eyes?" David kept his head down, never speaking unless called upon in class. His voice, when heard, was soft and strange behind the layers of cardboard. Teachers praised his intelligence, but students only saw the box. They avoided him like he carried a disease. No one sat near him during lunch. No one shared notes. No one dared touch him. Except Favor. She was different. She sat 2 rows ahead of David in English class. Bright eyes, quiet presence, always scribbling stories in a worn-out notebook. One afternoon, as the teacher read a passage aloud, David answered a question with startling insight. The room went silent. Favor turned, just slightly. She looked at him, not at the mask, but through it. And for the first time, someone didn't laugh. That glance stuck with her. Over the next few days, she caught herself watching him. The way he never fidgeted, the way he read ahead during lessons, the way he flinched when others mocked him, but never responded. She wanted to speak to him, but every time she tried, her friends pulled her away. "Why are you looking at Carton Boy?" they teased. Favor forced a laugh. "I wasn't. He's weird, that's all." But inside, she felt something she couldn't explain. Curiosity, guilt, and maybe something deeper. David, behind his carton mask, noticed her glances. And though he never said a word, his heart began to hope. Just a little. Favor couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time she saw David alone at lunch, hunched over his tray with his carton mask slightly tilted, as if he were listening to the world rather than living in it, her chest tightened. Curiosity had become compassion. Compassion was turning into something else, something she didn't understand. One afternoon, she finally found the courage. While her friends were in the cafeteria line, she walked up to David's corner table, notebook in hand, heart pounding. "Hi," she said softly. David looked up, startled. He didn't respond, but tilted his head slightly, listening. "I liked what you said in English yesterday, about the story. It was really smart." Silence. Then, slowly, he gave a small nod. But before Favor could say more, her friends spotted her. "Favor, what are you doing?" Sarah called out, her voice sharp. Favor hesitated. "I was just with Carton Boy," another girl sneered. Do you like him or something?" Laughter, loud, cruel. David stood abruptly, tray shaking in his hands, and rushed out of the cafeteria. Later that day, Favor found herself cornered near the lockers. Her friends pressed on. "Seriously, what's your deal with him?" Favor, panicked and embarrassed, snapped. "I don't like him. He's a freak with a box on his head, okay? I just felt sorry for him." Unbeknownst to her, David was just around the corner, listening. The words hit him like glass shattering in his chest. The tiny hope he had cracked. And from that day, he stopped looking at her, even through the slits in his carton mask. The wall between them, once made of silence, was now made of pain. And this time, it felt permanent. The days after Favor's betrayal were darker than ever. David returned to silence, deeper silence, the kind that echoed in his chest. He stopped participating in class, stopped answering questions, even stopped eating during lunch. But the mocking didn't stop. One rainy afternoon, during gym class, a group of boys cornered him near the locker room. "Hey, Carton Boy," one of them said, smirking. "What do you really look like under that mask? Alien? Demon? Or just too ugly to show your face?" David turned away, but a rough hand grabbed his shoulder. Another yanked at the side of his carton. "No, don't," he yelled, voice cracking for the first time. But it was too late. The mask tore. The front peeled away. The world paused. The boy who tore it off gasped, stumbled backward, and collapsed. One screamed, another fainted. The last one clawed at the walls, muttering nonsense as if he'd seen something his brain couldn't comprehend. David stood frozen, half his face exposed. Beautiful. Terrible. Divine. More students ran in. Then more screams. A girl hit the floor with a thud. The gym erupted in chaos. Teachers dragged him out, covering his face with a towel. Sirens echoing in the distance. An ambulance came. 2, in fact. The school was locked down. Later that evening, David sat in the principal's office, carton mask duct-taped hastily back together. Ruth and Emeka sat beside him, silent and pale. "This is a serious incident," the principal said gravely. "We're considering expulsion. And the media, they're already asking questions." David didn't speak. He couldn't. He had always feared the day someone would truly see him. Now they had, and the world was cracking under the weight of it. The news spread like wildfire. Boy collapses after seeing mysterious student's face. Carton mask incident sparks panic at school. Favor couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The guilt gnawed at her like rust on metal. She kept hearing David's voice. "I just felt sorry for him." Her words, poisonous, cowardly. And now, he was gone, pulled out of school, back into the shadows she had helped shove him into. 3 days later, she found the courage to go to his house. David sat by the window, carton mask back in place, curtains drawn tight. His eyes were barely visible through the slits. When Ruth let Favor in, he didn't move. He didn't speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Silence. "I should have stood up for you. I was scared. Scared of losing my friends. Of being laughed at. But I hurt you. And I let them hurt you too." David's fingers clenched slightly. Favor stepped closer. "That day, when you answered the question in class, I thought, wow, he's brave. Smarter than all of us. But I didn't tell you. I let them drown your voice out." She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. the one she always wrote in, and held it out. I wrote something for you. About someone who wears a mask, not to hide his shame, but to protect the world from his gift. David hesitated, then took it. For the first time, he looked at her, truly looked. Behind the slits, his eyes shimmered, not with power, but pain. I forgive you, he said quietly. But that doesn't erase it. I know, Favor replied, but maybe it's a start. Outside, the clouds parted slightly. Inside, two souls, once separated by fear, sat in a fragile silence, beginning to mend what had been broken. The days that followed were quiet, but no longer hollow. David read every word in Favor's notebook, line by line, over and over again. Her story mirrored his life, but this time it ended differently. The masked boy didn't die alone. He found someone who saw beyond the danger, someone who stayed. For the first time in his life, David smiled behind the mask. Weeks later, Favor visited again, more often now. They talked, laughed, played board games under the dim glow of a shaded lamp, and slowly, the weight on David's heart began to lift. One afternoon, Ruth entered with a small black case and placed it gently on the table. "We've been working with a doctor," she said softly. "These might help." Inside were a pair of dark, specially designed lenses, coated with an experimental filter that blocked the harmful radiance of David's eyes, without dimming his vision entirely. His heart pounded. With trembling fingers, David removed the mask for the first time in Favor's presence. Not fully, just a crack. Just enough. She gasped, but didn't faint. What she saw wasn't dangerous. It was human, vulnerable, beautiful in a way that made her eyes fill with tears. "Hi," she whispered, voice shaking. David looked at her directly. No box, no shadows, just him. "Hi," he replied. The moment wasn't loud or magical. It was soft, real. A tiny door creaking open after years of being sealed shut. From that day on, the carton mask didn't disappear, but it no longer defined him. David was no longer just the carton boy. He was a boy with a face, a voice, and a friend who had seen him and chosen to stay. And for the first time in his life, he felt free. Months passed. The carton mask now sat quietly on David's shelf, collecting dust like an artifact from a different lifetime. He still wore his protective lenses in public, but with growing confidence. His steps were no longer hesitant, his voice no longer trembled. People still stared, but they no longer saw just the mystery. They saw David, the boy who had once hidden behind cardboard and silence, now walking with quiet strength. Favor never left his side. Together, they returned to school. Rumors swelled, as always. Some still called him the carton boy, behind his back. But it no longer mattered. When a classmate mocked a shy new student for stuttering, David stood up, not with rage, but with calm authority. "You don't get to define someone just because you don't understand them," he said. The room went silent. The message landed. Word spread again, but this time, it was different. David began speaking at assemblies about bullying, identity, and the danger of fearing what we don't understand. His story, once a source of ridicule, became a symbol of resilience. He learned to use his eyes not as a weapon, but as a warning, a last resort, controlled, purposeful. Where once his gaze caused pain, now his presence sparked change. And Favor, brave, fierce Favor, became his voice when his faltered, and his mirror when he forgot who he was. One evening, as they sat under a tree after school, she turned to him. "Do you ever wish you were born normal?" David smiled faintly. No, he said, because then I might have never met you. The wind rustled through the leaves, warm and gentle, and in that moment, the boy once cursed by beauty and burden finally knew peace. His eyes hadn't destroyed the world. They had helped reshape it. Is there anything you have learned about David? Let Sluss know in the comments section.